Welcome to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. I am your host, Shana Southan. I am an angel mum, a rainbow mum, a pregnancy loss practitioner, and trauma-informed coach. I created the Institute of Healing Through Pregnancy Loss out of my own experience with loss in the hopes to provide understanding and healing, educating people on pregnancy loss, and creating more women or men in trained support roles. In this podcast, I hope to shed light on what I wish I knew in relation to pregnancy loss, opening up the conversation, breaking the stigma, and bringing real-life stories plus guest experts. Thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive into today's episode. One in 4 pregnancies will result in miscarriage. 1 in 8 women will experience infertility. 1 in 100 women will experience recurrent miscarriage. And 1 in 160 births end in stillbirth. Have you been wanting to make a difference in the lives of women or men who have experienced pregnancy loss because you can see so many suffering in silence, but you just don't know how? Collectively, we can change how bereaved parents can access mental, physical, and emotional support after their experience. There is a lot of women with unhealed trauma, and there is a huge gap in the current support system when it comes to bereaved parents' recovery after loss. There are too many women and men suffering in silence. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is a worldwide, one-of-a-kind program that gives you proven methods designed for healthcare professionals, medical staff, midwives, nurses, doulas, birth workers, coaches, and angel parents alike. The Pregnancy Loss Practitioner Certification is bridging that gap. It will give you a proven support structure to follow and education specific to pregnancy loss, created by a loss mum. It is creating more education specifically for loss so that you can enhance your service and become the point of difference. Or you can create the support that you so desperately needed in your healing after loss. This is the next level of growth and expansion you have been searching for. So does this sound like something that you have been searching for? Let's explore this more together. You can head to the episode show notes where you'll find the program application, or direct message me on Instagram and let's open up the conversation in how you can use this education. You have a gift, and I look forward to supporting you and witnessing you bring your gift to the world, healing and transforming women's lives. Hello, beautiful souls. Today's episode is a part 1 of a part 2 series. So I hope you enjoy listening into part 1 and make sure that you do listen into part 2 when it becomes available as well. Now let's dive in. Welcome, beautiful souls, to the What I Wish I Knew After Pregnancy Loss podcast. Today, I have with me the beautiful Tara Accardo. Tara lost both of her parents to cancer within 6 months, and it was an insanely difficult time in her life. There was a lot of darkness, feeling lost and confused and unsure of how she was going to move forward. Tara finally realized she couldn't live in that space, nor did she want to live in that space. There was a day when she had this low-key aha moment that had been building for a while. Tara was getting to a point in her grief journey where she was feeling surprisingly okay and relatively healed and living a joyful, generally speaking, fulfilled life with some grief-ridden moments mixed in there, of course. She had a moment when speaking with a medium where she knew she was meant to do more with what she had lost. This is really when the concept of losses become gains became to fruition. This idea that despite any hardship we've endured, we can grow, learn, and evolve to become more fulfilled and embrace a more meaningful life, even after a devastating loss. Once she had that realization, the way she viewed her own personal journey, her purpose or dharma in life, and her approach to life in general really shifted for the better. Losses Become Gains was up and running later that year, and it has now evolved into a blog, a course, podcast, and online community. Her mission is to help fellow grievers and those who have been through a loss or are struggling to find gains from their losses, meaning more beauty, peace, meaning, and fulfillment in their life after suffering a loss. Welcome to the show, Tara. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this so much.
I know, me too. I absolutely love everything that you have created. And, I can empathize a little bit with your story myself in losing my dad when I was 19. So, I love that what you've created has bloomed and blossomed from such a painful experience, especially in losing both of your parents. And I wanted to have you come onto the show because there's so much when you're in the depths of grief and trying to navigate that time. It's almost like you can't ever see a beautiful life for yourself again afterwards. Mm-hmm. And the fact that this is essentially what your purpose encompasses, and it's what I've experienced as well. That's why I wanted to bring you on, because there is such beauty in life after loss, and how you can help, or how you got there yourself. So do you want to share a little bit about your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I know the intro probably covered a lot of it, but I'll go into a little bit more detail. Yeah. So really, up until 2019, I hadn't experienced really a ton of very traumatic loss. I'll be very honest. I had a really beautiful childhood. I was very lucky and fortunate in so many ways. I did lose a couple of grandparents here and there. Of course, that was hard at the time, but I was much younger. I didn't understand grief the way certainly that you do when you're older. I lost a cousin in a very tragic car accident. So, I had experiences with death, but, I feel like there's death across the board, no matter who you lose, is difficult, of course. But I feel like, child loss, parent loss, probably sibling loss as well. Again, it's not something I can speak to. I'm an only child, but, just those core people, right? Like, it's just next level. And so for me, I saw my parents being with me well into my 40s or 50s. I didn't expect them to go anywhere. So what was really so shocking about my parents' diagnosis was, so my mom was diagnosed with esophageal cancer around like May or June of 2019. And she died probably 7 or 8 months later in December of 2019. So that was just, again, the randomness of it, I think, was very traumatic. How relatively, I think this is all kind of in the eye of the beholder, but for us, it felt very quick. And just, I always say this, like, that death didn't like match her and her light and her personality, if that makes sense. It was like, if anything, like we always joke, like she was so aloof, and she would just like sometimes like walk into traffic or something, or she would like, she was just such a flower child of sorts. And we always joked, we're like, I swear to God, if this woman's going to like die in any way, it's going to be because she's going to get hit by a car or something. It's because of something so careless, not cancer. It just didn't, like the math was not mathing. So that was just, and then just as a daughter, especially, losing your mom, it's just like, it just hurts in ways you can't almost put words to. And with my dad, he, at that point in 2019, had been going through prostate cancer for like 5 going on 6 years at that point. And not that that was any less shocking, but my father's father, so my grandfather, actually had prostate cancer and died of that as well. So not to say it was any less surprising, but it was sort of like, okay, well, oh my gosh, I wonder if he inherited this from him. I don't know, right? But, once my mom died, I could just tell he was not the same person. He just did not have really a zest for life. He was very just gray. I don't know how to distinguish, just like if his aura had a color, it was gray. It wasn't even like on the scale. And he just wasn't the same. And his cancer ended up spreading from the prostate into his back and into his brain. So there came a point where he was kind of not really comprehensive, or like talking to him wasn't. I remember coming home one night and having to call an ambulance for him. That was the second time at that point. And I like remember trying to talk to him, and he just kind of wasn't making sense. And I was like, oh, this is super serious. And thankfully I lived somewhat nearby, but he was, still doing okay at that point. So I don't know, that just felt very quick to me. how it spread. I think we kind of knew it was spreading, but not to the brain. So that was like very like, whoa, okay, this is bad. And so from there, he went into the ICU and then to like a post-acute facility. So not quite hospice, but like eventually transitioned to hospice. From there, he never came home. And then I'm trying to remember exactly when that was. That was probably around like May of 2020. So again, of course, COVID was abundant. And that was just a really complicated and difficult time. Trying to see him was next to impossible. But thank God they did let me in closer to when, he died, to get some one-on-one time with him. And then he died in July of 2020. So yeah, I mean, if you had told me when I was younger or even in high school or even like, so I'm 32 now, but this was, kind of like late 20s. Like if you had told me in my 20s that I was going to lose both of my parents that quickly, both to cancer, I mean, you couldn't have told me that. I never would have believed it. But, here I found myself. So it's like summer of 2020 and I'm like, okay, what now? Where do I even go in life without the two people? Oh my God, I need the most. I wasn't horribly codependent on my parents, but I was very close with them. I'm very fortunate that I had a really beautiful relationship with both of them and we were all very close. And so it was just this feeling, again, especially as an only child, where my just immediate family was just completely ripped away from me. And then my 19-year-old dog died the following year. So that was really just like, this is so morbid, but the final nail in the coffin as far as my immediate family, because I very much considered her the sister I never had, was all gone. And I remember having to put her down. It was like the middle of the night. My now husband, then boyfriend, we were driving home and I was like crying, but also in such shock because I was like, is this rock bottom? Like, have I reached it yet? Please, for the love of God, can I just reach this so I can rebuild my life somehow? Like, what does rebuilding even look like though? Like, I couldn't even think about that. I was just like, where am I? And I mean, from there, like, it's so funny. Grief is so funny. It's like, what do? You have to continue moving on. Right. But the question I like to ask now is like, okay, but how do you do that? Where do you even start? Because even just that can be very overwhelming for people. And it's so difficult to like still having to work, having kids or, just a partner or just any responsibilities really can feel so impossible. And you just don't even know how you're functioning each day or how to even get out of bed. So really from there, it was just picking up the pieces, and it's just very day by day, moment by moment, just trying to, make some happy memories again and just reevaluating. But that reevaluation, I would say, did not come right away. For me, it was reading a lot of really inspirational books and going on a lot of walks and listening to podcasts. And little by little, I was like building up this strength again, that I guess I'd sort of lost, or I felt like kind of died along with my family. And from there, I just, really made sure I had a really solid gratitude practice. Like, I like created a routine for myself. I just did things and I found things that really sparked joy. And I didn't push myself. I just did what felt right and did what felt good. And that was, so I kind of like healed. I'm still in the process of healing my grief, let's be real, but, trying to heal your grief, but then also, trying to build and create this, it's kind of what I always say, this beautiful, vibrant, meaningful life for yourself after loss and how to do that. And so that's very much my bread and butter is, helping people along in that process and being like, okay, well, let's take like 20 steps back. Like, here's where we start. So with that all being said, eventually got to a point where I was like, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Like you said in the intro, I was like, okay, I'm actually not doing too bad. Like, of course I have my griefy moments. I miss my parents constantly. Like, sure. But generally speaking, could be worse. Right. And so I was like, man, if I can end up feeling this way, like, I feel like I need to share this. I feel like this is information other people could maybe hear or benefit from or whatever. So as you mentioned, yeah, I do see a medium probably like a couple times a year. And I know that is not everyone's cup of tea. So I'm not saying anyone has to go out and do that. But for me, it has been very healing, just feeling feeling like I can connect with my loved ones by myself, which I know I can. I know there's signs and symbols and all the things out there. But for me, someone had described it once like, okay, yeah, we can kind of get in touch with our loved ones sort of just by ourselves or through meditation or whatever. That's kind of like a telephone, but like going to a medium, it's like FaceTiming them. You know what I mean? It's a little more personal. You feel like you can like get just a little more in there with your communication. So anyway, I was just talking to her about this. We had a really beautiful reading that came through in these incredible ways as usual. And I was kind of talking to her about just sort of next steps in my life. And I was just like, I just feel like I'm meant to do something real like big with this, bigger than I'm kind of even aware of. And as we were talking, the phrase losses become gains like kind of slipped out. And the second that slipped out, I was like, oh, I just tapped into something really cool here. Okay, wait a second. And then so we hung up and I just like, I don't even know what I did actually. Now that I think about it, I think I just like got on my computer and started just brain dumping what this could look like. And for me, because I'm very much a writer at heart, and a blog is something I had tried to do a while ago, but it never felt very like authentic. I was like, what am I really going to write about? So that's really where I started it with the blog. And so throughout, this was early 2022. So throughout all of 2022, I was kind of like writing and just getting all these blog posts together, building my website, all the technical things, getting ready to like launch everything on Instagram and all the things. And was finally ready around like November of 2022. So that's when I put all this out into the world. And then very shortly thereafter, I was like, oh, I think I'm really tapping into something I'm like truly meant to be doing here. So with that is when I decided to become a grief coach, or at least get that certification. So I did that like December, January, got that. And then from there, the course felt like the really beautiful next step. So I have my Grief Becomes Gains online course. So that is really just kind of everything I talked about. It's really just to help grievers kind of at any stage, really. It's very approachable for kind of anyone where they're at with their grief, but really just taking them from just feeling like they're just existing to really living and thriving, and how to cope with the day-to-day things and you know, just anything from the big to the small things, right? And navigating all of that. So that's what that course is. And then from there, once I started recording the course, I was like, this recording thing's really fun. And this whole like microphone setup, like, this is great. I want more of this. So I kind of had the podcast in the back of my brain, like even in 2022, but I just felt like it was so intimidating. And I was just like, oh gosh, I don't know if I can do that yet. I want to build a little bit of a following. But at that point, I was like, okay, I think I'm getting ready for the podcast. So that's where that was born. And then literally like today, I just shared with my mailing list that I now have my Losses Become Gains daily journal. So that was born out of a prompt that I had created that I like gave my mailing list, but now it's in like a hard copy form that people can like actually go out and buy on Amazon and use in their everyday life. And so it's just kind of been one project after another. So it's been very busy, but very fulfilling. And you had kind of mentioned like sort of the soul's purpose. And, you know, one of the things I mention is I just feel like this is my soul's purpose. This is my dharma in life, is to bring this support and guidance and coaching, however you want to call it, to people. And so I'm currently literally in a course right now that is training me to become however you want to call it, like a spiritual life coach or a soul purpose coach. But it's, for me, with my sort of filter, I kind of want to marry the grief coaching and the soul purpose coaching. And it's sort of this like, okay, we're addressing your grief, but we're going beyond that. And it's like, you know, how do you find your way after such loss? And whether or not you've even gone through loss, really just finding, you know, I think so many people can feel lost or sort of like, what am I meant to do here? Or I feel like I'm meant to do it, but I don't know where to start, or I don't know how to get there. So that's where I can come in. So very excited for that. I should be finished with that towards the end of this year. But yeah, there's a lot going on, but I'm having a lot of fun with it.
I love it. There's so much of your story that I could relate to. And, you know, like I said at the beginning too, like I've lost one part of my, you know, one pillar of the strength that I had when I was growing up. Like you think that, and I think that's the same with, you know, when you're going through pregnancy loss as well. Like you have this vision of your life, you expect The natural way of life is that your parents are always going to be there until they're old and then they die. You expect that you're going to fall pregnant and that you're going to have this healthy baby and you're going to have this family. And it's this, you feel like then when all of that goes wrong, it goes against like the natural way of life. Like, it's actually one thing that my pop said to me, because he ended up dying when he was 90 and just after his 90th birthday. But one thing he said to me when my dad died was, it wasn't meant to happen this way. He wasn't meant to go before me.
Yeah.
And, that still gives me goosebumps to this day. Like, because, my dad was 49, like but he had an incredible life in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But he was living on borrowed time. He had his first open heart surgery when he was 29.
Whoa.
So, yeah. And then he ended up having quite a few in a short number of years after that as well. I think he had his second when I was born, or I know I might have been a toddler, because mum said I was holding on to her fingers, walking down the hospital corridors, yelling and listening to my voice echo. Oh my gosh.
That's so cute in such a dark place. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So she was pregnant with me the first time he had his first open heart. And then
I can't imagine.
And then I was a toddler when he had his second. So, growing up, we always knew that he was unwell, but you never, ever expect that it's going to happen where you lose your parent at such a young age. You weren't that much older than me when I lost my dad, like I was 19. So also at that age, you don't have the mental capacity to process that loss. You're like, you've just lost this huge person in your life, and then you're left to try and process it. And you're so young and you're like, I don't, you're still trying to figure yourself out and the world out. And, how do you process grief? And it wasn't until I was probably in my mid-20s that I ended up having to see a therapist, because I was like, okay, now it's like 6 years of grief and trauma that I haven't been able to process that's coming out in my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it was stemming back to him and to the emotions that I wasn't able to process at the time.
Yeah.
Because you're like, like you said before, you've got to go on. Life goes on. I was 19. I was like, but there was also, when I look back now at that time, there was a lot of things that I was doing to receive validation from people, to receive what I felt like I was missing. And I look back over that time in my life, and when I look back over it, it was a very dark time. And what I was choosing to do to help myself wasn't the greatest things to do, but wasn't the greatest choices.
Yeah.
But I was trying to fill a void that I didn't really know that I had until obviously later in life. And then I had the realization, okay, now this is all coming out.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, like you get, and that's like even when we experienced the pregnancy loss, like again, like it feels like it goes against the natural way of life.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But I went through very similar grief, although the grief then was a little bit different, because I didn't feel so personally responsible for my dad dying, but I felt so responsible for my baby dying.
Mm.
So that grief then became very personal and very like, it was everything that I did that was wrong, that caused the death, that caused everything. So then you've got the grief, but then you've got all of this, like,
tremendous
guilt and shame and blame. And you're just like, I can't talk to anyone about this, because if I talk to someone, they're going to judge me and they're going to probably shame me even more, because my body couldn't do the thing that it was meant to do.
Yeah. Oh
but I was really lucky to have my husband, he came on the scene a year after my dad had died. So I went into a depression for like that year and wouldn't come out of the house, didn't want to speak to anyone, didn't want to do anything. I tried to make coffee the way that my dad made me coffee. I would make my breakfast the way that he would make me breakfast. And I wanted to live as if he was still here.
Yeah.
But obviously he wasn't. But I was in that place for a year. And my husband sort of came on the scene after that year. So he kind of pulled me out of that depression.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd witnessed me there and he could witness me going there again after we'd lost our baby.
Yeah.
So he was able to recognize, externally, like what was happening. It's very hard to find these people on the outside of you that can support you and help you navigate that time, especially, it's funny because like, even though I hadn't lost my mom, like you said, your dad, how he changed after your mom had died, we were trying to support my mum, like, because it's a completely different, relationship that she's lost.
Totally.
She's lost the person that she chose to be with for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
So completely different relationship. And even though she hadn't died, she had, like, it was almost like her spirit had died and we'd kind of lost her. We had lost her personality. We lost her spirit. We lost all of that person that she was when dad was around. And we were we pulled together. We had a very close-knit family as well. So we all pulled together and we supported each other through it, but she wasn't the same.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you watch that happen as well. And again, as children, like I was 19, my brother was 17, my sisters were 15. So, how do you do that when the mom can't, like, she's just, you feel broken and she probably would have felt just as broken.
Absolutely.
It's a very, very comfortable place to stay in too, like when you do go through something like that. And like I said, like I was there for a year. It was a very comfortable place to be, very dark and very emotional and very sad, but very comfortable because I was like, well, I don't have to do anything here. I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to see anyone. I don't have to be anyone. I'll just exist. Like you said, you just exist.
Mm-hmm.
But, and like you mentioned in the bio as well, like there came a moment where you're just like, no, actually, this is not the way that I'm meant to live my life.
Yeah.
This is not the place that I'm meant to stay in. This is not my forever place. A lot harder to get out of when my dad died, a little bit easier to get out of when my baby died because I had been to, like you said, rock bottom. Mm-hmm. I'd been there and then I visited rock bottom again after my baby died, visited again. But at that point, I was like, no, I know how to get myself out of this. This is not the place that I'm destined to stay in.
Yeah.
But it can become a very consuming place to be in. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love so much that you've created, also now what you're doing, you've created the support for those that are navigating that darkness of grief, but then also, how do I connect to maybe my purpose again in life? There's never going to be, and I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up because it's never going to be that there's purpose in what you've been through, but there's purpose in your life again after those losses.
Yeah.
And that I think is something that's missing too, is there's a lot of coaches out there that can support people through the emotional side of things. But then once they're coming to that place of feeling healed, there's still more support that they need, because I remember being there myself. You get to that point and then you're like, okay, now I can start to think better. I can think more clearly. I can see more clearly. Like, now what?
Right.
What do I do now? And then that's where you can also help with that next step, because then it's like, well, I ended up in a job that was very unfulfilling. How do I create something in my life? How to create that joy? And like you said, you created those, I like to call them joy triggers, because we talk about triggers a lot as a negative thing, but
Yes.
triggers can be positive too. Like, what triggers that joy? What sparks that life back in you? Start bringing that back in. And one of the things that you've said that you also support with is actually, how to approach grief and loss more holistically, because it's a very holistic experience to navigate it.
Yeah.
You can't just like take your head off your body and go, I'm gonna just acknowledge my head here.
We can laugh about it now.
Yeah. Like I said, I've been there. I saw a psychologist and I worked on my mental health, but there was always something missing. And like, I love how you mentioned that it's a holistic thing, because that's what I absolutely believe in as well. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think whenever I sort of hear or talk about like healing grief sort of holistically, I mean, really, I think it comes down to like kind of two things. Number one, grief affects so many aspects of your life, right? So it's, you kind of almost have to heal them all like separately, but together, because so much of it is intertwined. So I know like triggers is a big one. I love talking about grief triggers because it's so hard. And especially in the acute grief, especially early on. And you're just like, okay, how do I handle this at work? How do I handle this going to the grocery store that I used to go to with my parent or whatever, and these things that you're maybe prepared for, and then the things that you're not prepared for, and just how to navigate that and be present. And, the breath work for me is another big coping tool. And I get into a lot of that on my blog and things, but, so yeah, I think it's recognizing the fact that grief has a lot of faces. It affects a lot of different parts of your life. So you do have to like do the work in sort of each part of those, and with your relationships too. And then, I like kind of what you were saying earlier where, okay, yeah, we can like a grief coach or whoever can help you through like maybe the early grief, or like certainly helping you through like those emotions. But then, okay, once you start feeling better, again, it's sort of that like that what then? And I don't want people to ever feel like it's like, okay, I'm doing okay now, but like we're all kind of like walking on a tightrope too, as if like, that could go away some days. And listen, it's grief, right? So it is going to ebb and flow. We all hear about the grief waves or the waves of grief, whatever you want to say, and how it will vary day by day for sure. But I think it's important too to recognize that like different phases of your life, like let's say you're doing really well, but then like this is two examples for me. Was one, I was doing okay without mom and dad a little bit, generally day to day, but then like I got married and went through that whole process. And like, there was just certain things where I'm like, God, I wish I could just go to like one or both of them for this, that, or another thing. And not being able to do that, not even having them there that day, or, whatever it was, that was devastating in its own right. And I felt very alone through that. And again, you can have like, I think it's important to say this out loud. You can have like a wonderful support system or a wonderful partner or great kids or, whoever it is, but sometimes it doesn't. I just want to recognize that sometimes it doesn't make up for the fact that the people that you need are just simply not here. And that's okay. And that's okay to sit in for a little bit and just acknowledge and be like, you know what, this sucks. That really freaking hurts. and to just own that and allow ourselves to feel crappy about that for a little bit. But, and it's that happening over and over again, kind of. And I always joke that there's sort of this like emotional callus you sort of build up where like things just continue happening so many times, or certain triggers happen so many times where you're just like, oh, here we go again. Okay. And you kind of get used to it with some time. So I hate the whole like time heals all wounds, because time alone will not heal. There's a lot of work and there's things that have to go into that. But that is why time, is a factor. And then one of the other aspects of my life, and actually full transparency, I haven't actually announced this on social or anything yet. So this is like the first time I'm saying this out loud anywhere, but I thought it was so appropriate to say on this podcast of all things, but my husband and I are actually expecting right now. So I am pregnant and we're very excited. I'm like just almost done with the first trimester. So I feel like comfortable enough to share it, but it's scary. But, speaking of pregnancy loss and just pregnancy, all the things, like that is one thing. I don't know. I for some reason was just like hardwired to worry that we were going to lose it or something's going to go wrong. And we're very fortunate so far. Everything's fine. But like, there's always that little thing in the back of my head. And it's so funny because my husband's like, why are you worrying? It's all fine. This coming from the man who has not lost one person close to him. Okay. So I'm like, and I'm actually, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, that probably comes from somewhere, that worry that something's going to go wrong. Because look at what I've had go wrong in the last several years. Like, of course, there's some trauma there. Like, just because I'm a coach or just because I'm in this space doesn't mean I don't still have things I'm kind of working through. Right. So that's sort of been a part of that journey. But anyway, so now, long story short, I'm kind of entering that phase of my life. And I'm just like, oh my God, I mean, how am I supposed to like navigate parenthood? How am I supposed to navigate this oh my God, what I wouldn't do to like go to my mom or my dad for certain things, or, I'm not going to have them around to be grandparents now. And just, so it's just all, and those things I always, my husband, I always wanted a family, but like, I knew that thing was coming. I knew they weren't going to be here for that. I'm like, well, that freaking sucks. But now that it's actually happening, I'm like, oh, they're really not here. Okay, this is going to be a long road. And so trying to navigate that, that's why journaling is like such a big thing. I think there's still, quite frankly, some shock around that. Like, I don't think I've totally processed the fact that they're not here, that I can't go to them for certain things. Like, I know they're looking out. I know they're around. I know they're seeing things. And I like to think that they met this little soul before it came here. But, I think it's also okay to say, like, that's not enough sometimes, right? We just want them here. And that's tough. And so just navigating that, we'll see how it goes. It's still early days, but yeah, so it's tough. Life is so difficult after loss. It's full of so many exciting moments. And then sometimes those can quickly be diminished a little bit by like, oh my God, I don't have this person, whoever this is for you. And it's just this crazy roller coaster dichotomy of like just highs and lows, really. And that lasts a lifetime. And so that's one of the reasons that I want to incorporate sort of the soul work, or just, not just necessarily, the grief work's very important. So the grief coaching, that's absolutely a passion, but I just think there's more to it than that. It can go deeper than that. And that's what I want to like invite people to tap into, because, I absolutely know the feeling of being very lost, feeling very alone, feeling very confused about like, okay, what's my purpose now? Like, and loss can definitely like elicit a lot of aha moments, right? Like, am I really happy in my job? Am I happy where I'm living? Like, whatever this looks like, but leaning into that and not making any like crazy rash decision. I literally, after my dad died, I was like contemplating moving to LA within like a month. I don't know where I thought I was going. I still had their condo here that I had to deal with, where I'm like literally still living right now. I'm like, Tara, what were you thinking? Which, by the way, don't make any rash decisions when you're grieving, because just don't do it. But grief can elicit that kind of response. So, just being as present as we can with all of it and just acknowledging how we're feeling, and I'm sure a lot of people are like, okay, Tara, I've heard this before. Like, yeah, I know I need to let my emotions and everything out, but it's so true. Like, we just can't ignore those things. So when and if feelings like that do come up, or there's some complicated feelings, or if the grief is like delayed at all because you might have some stuff going on, like the way I grieved my mom was absolutely, there was some delayed grief in there, because not long after my dad started going downhill. So that's why I think I had this big epiphany sort of after my dad died, because I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't even processed mom yet, which was devastating. And now I don't have either. Like, what is life? Like, and that can keep happening even years later. So yeah, a lot to process.
Yes. I want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
By the time this goes to air, you might have already done
I think I probably will. Yes. So we're going to do it pretty soon, but yeah.
But I just want to say thank you for sharing that beautiful piece of your journey with us.
Thank you for listening in with me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. If you did, I would absolutely love to hear from you. Take a screenshot of this episode, share it to social media, and tag me at Institute of Healing_PL. I love seeing what is resonating with you right now. If you want to chat further, I invite you to connect with me through Instagram. Head over and follow my Instagram account, send me a DM, and let's open the communication. If you want to know more about how you can be the support for others, head to the show notes and fill out the application form for the Pregnancy Loss Practitioner certification. I want to also note here that what I share within the episodes is not medical advice. If you need further support, please consult your doctor. Thank you again. Much love to you. Be gentle with yourself, and I look forward to supporting you on the next episode.